The 80s had the General. The 90s had John Gilligan. In the noughties, it was the reign of Martin Marlowe Hyland. His was a familiar path with success and power, and then the recklessness. He had to go, because with him, an innocent young man doing an honest day's work died. Crime World presents Caught in the Crossfire, the unsolved murders of coke kingpin Marlowe Hyland and innocent Anthony Campbell. Available now on all podcast platforms. So I was here.
Yeah.
Just one of the guests got a bit confused about the time. So I've been sitting here in the studio on my own for 40 minutes.
Yeah. Not a good place to be, is it?
No.
On your own in your head?
No. I'll tell you what I've been doing and how I currently don't want to talk now.
Right. Go on. Tell us what you're doing.
I've been scrolling on TikTok, which is my absolute go-to when I have a free moment, morning or night.
Yeah.
My TikTok feed is just full of dogs doing silly
really?
things.
Because I mostly get people getting battered over the head in various parts of the country.
Do you?
Yeah, I do. That's what I get. So you
don't get any of that. Then I found myself in deep thought about whether or not, it'd be a good idea to get a paddling pool to let the dog at home
play in. Yeah.
Because he's only new and he's never been in the sea or swam, and yet all his breed seemed to swim.
Yeah.
So I had all that going round my head.
Yeah.
And
so you were left with your own thoughts and feelings for about 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And you're thoroughly deflated.
I'm so deflated. I don't even want to talk to you because I will talk to you because we're doing a podcast, obviously. But that's where I've been left.
Yeah.
Do you find that when you're kind of left on your own, then you don't want to?
Not really. No. My head is a wonderful place to be with.
TikTok is very addictive.
TikTok is very addictive, and that's what a great segue into the most addictive drug in the country.
True,
but actually, that is what they accuse social media companies of being providing the same type of biochemical hit that drugs do. Like obviously, the segue is we're going to talk about crack cocaine, but that is how TikTok and in particular is described. And I know TikTok get a bit unhappy with that description, but it provides the same kind of dopamine kick.
It's really
to
bad
the brain
for me because I'm on it all the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to actually delete it off my phone.
Yeah, so what it does
Should I do that? I actually feel panic about that now.
Well, no, I mean, what it does is it provides you with, like they test it. There's certain neurochemicals in your brain, dopamine in particular, that drugs work on, particularly the addictive drugs, particularly cocaine. Cocaine works basically on dopamine receptors in your brain. If you can imagine, it just provides a rush of these chemicals into your system. And of course, they measured social media, and obviously it provides it to a lesser extent, but it does have that same thing.
So TikTok is the cocaine of social media.
Or social media is the digital equivalent of cocaine. I mean that
I don't feel high. I just go into this zone where I I find it very relaxing actually.
Well, so do people who take heroin, I think. And then when they stop taking it, they feel deflated and lonely.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, no, I'm going to delete it. It's got too much. And I'm too old for TikTok. I know I actually am to be wasting as much time of my life on it as I am. Well, first thing in the morning, I go on it and I'm...
Yeah. But you see, that is obviously, look, TikTok is not going to take over your life and destroy it. But it is a bit of, it's a pattern, an addictive pattern that we all have to a degree in social media, where you're constantly, checking it and you're getting a little kick. You wake up in the morning and get a little kick off it. And it does mimic drug addiction. Obviously, crack cocaine, obviously.
We're going to talk as well about the amount of people showing up for treatment for this. I don't know. Has anyone ever shown up for treatment for?
Well, they do have
TikTok
social media.
addiction?
They do have social media. They do have, obviously in the States where everything exists to some extent, but they do have, like it is something that's treated.
Not normal society though.
Well, it is something that's like, that's not an analogy that I'm making out of nothing. Like it is something that is studied, and people do for gaming and for social media. People are treated for addiction, like digital addiction. Do you know? And you're looking at me there now with
like
quizzically.
I'm in some sort of AA meeting here or something.
Well,
it's really just to tell you that I didn't feel like talking to you, but I've kind of got over it now.
Yeah.
Now, we are actually going to, on a more serious note, talk about crack cocaine. So there's been a couple of seizures in the last month, mainly in Dublin and in Limerick.
Yeah.
Which seem to be the two areas where this drug is concentrated.
Yeah.
For sale. Certainly. And obviously it is mainly targeting the polydrug users.
Well, to an
cocaine.
Yeah, to an extent. Like, I mean, what we have in Ireland obviously is a huge flood of cocaine across the country. Huge levels of usage, even by European standards, by world standards. Ireland is one of the, per capita, one of the heaviest users of cocaine. But crack cocaine is used much more narrowly and much more destructively, and it does get a lot less attention because it really is focused in a small number of areas. The poly users, absolutely, but it's focused really on. I mean, I think there was one point said the average crack cocaine user in Ireland is between the age of 20 and 29, mostly male. And a huge proportion of them, like technically homeless. So it's really, a narrow social group.
So crack cocaine, obviously, sort of in my early days of crime reporting, we used to be furnished with certain press releases from, drug rehabilitation centres. And the focus on crack cocaine was that, it had taken hold in America.
Yeah.
It was a big warning that it might one day come here. And in particular, I remember the imagery around it was this sort of devastation of physicality within people.
Yeah.
So what you'd see were users losing their teeth.
Yeah.
Their face would become very sunken, their eyes very bulged. And they'd have,
well, there was an association with violence due to paranoia, which really is a symptomatic of
well, most of these, I suppose, would have been people who had been arrested and who'd come into and had presumably, although back then, did people agree for their photographs to be used?
Well, no.
This was before there was you had to have agreement for all this sort of stuff. But I just recall it was a very kind of scary imagery that was used around it of the breakdown of the physical being over a short space of time, and lots of warnings about just how addictive it is. Now, of course, it is all those things. It has sort of slowly crept into Ireland without much ado.
Yeah.
If you reversed the clock here about 20 years even, or slightly longer, and there was a couple of seizures. Now, I mean, the one in Ballymun isn't huge. It's a small sort of street deal seizure. And the one in Limerick is up to €20,000 worth of it. Most of those values that we always put on drugs are the street value of them. So it's an inflated, really, it's the potential of the quantity. But it has sort of seeped in, and you'd wonder, is it because, I mean, there's not much furore about it, even though it's the addiction services really that are kind of raising the red flag here, because they have seen a reduction in opiate users going for their services. And in actual fact, I interviewed Dr. Bobby Smith last year, and he said that they hadn't not one single case in the teenage sector where there was problem heroin users coming for services, because it's like as if younger people aren't using heroin, or certainly they're not getting addicted to it, probably because there's more variety on the streets, and probably this crack cocaine is a little bit more. Do drugs go in and out of fashion? It's more available.
It's more available. I mean, you're right that why does the use of cocaine get such heavy levels of publicity? Not just in the Sunday World, but across all media. And a lot of it has been, you get this thing, which we've said ourselves, it's in every little village and GAA clubs and people. So that universality means that, but, crack cocaine is in very small sections of society, and people aren't that interested in that, and that's the reality. But the devastation caused by the drug is huge, and in fact, you have these community groups like the South Inner City Drugs and Alcohol Task Force, and other task forces in Bray. They have all put out statements in the last couple of years saying how there is an epidemic. Now, what it is it's a narrow epidemic affecting, as I said, when you have a huge percentage of the people who are already homeless, these people can become invisible to people. To society in general. I mean, they're effectively written off, and that's where the crack cocaine epidemic is hit. It's not hitting in South County Dublin private schools like regular cocaine is, and therefore it just doesn't get the attention. But the numbers are quite stark.
I mean, they're talking about a 400% increase within 10 years, and obviously most of these groupings, which are government funded or some of them are charities, are relying on publicity to generate the funds that they need. And they say they're chronically understaffed and, unable to deal with the crisis.
Yeah, because it has been focused. Certainly in Ballymun has been an area where the crack cocaine problem has been very stark, and also in parts of Tala. And what happens is that, the famous phrase crack houses, gets put forward in the media. But what can happen is that because you have this sort of a lot of homeless people, rather than a house gets taken over really, and the crack cocaine trade can be focused in there. Most of the trade is done with people that are already addicted, so it's a kind of a closed little circle. And Ballymun has seen a huge problem with it. I mean, the seizure this week. As you said, it's relatively small, but you can see how the crack cocaine trade has been done. There's the guys arrested are young teenagers on e-scooters. They're dealing with relatively small amounts, but still hugely profitable, and they're doing the business there. And I think RTE did a program on crack cocaine a couple of years ago.
Last year.
Was it last year? And which we had done something similar a year before that, and you could see this crack cocaine trade is operating in the open. And remember, it has spilled out into violence within Ballymun. There was, over the last few years, a large number of shootings, most of them non-fatal, most of them involving young men, and there has been a huge level of violence associated with that drugs trade. So if you think of crack cocaine, that it's also been a huge issue in parts of the South Inner City, and in part to an extent in the North Inner City as well. It gets focused on certain, there was certainly in certain flat complexes were getting to a degree taken over. We have the most recent gangland murder in this country, the murder of Josh Itselli, and that is intimately connected with the crack cocaine trade in the South Inner City. That's effectively, at least in part, it is suspected that's about a sort of turf war over seizures of crack cocaine. Josh Itselli, who we saw very harrowing pictures really of him being buried over the weekend. But, he was facing charges in relation to a seizure of €30,000 worth of crack cocaine at the time of his death. So there is big money to be made in it, even though nobody's going to be retiring to Dubai on the proceeds. And if you look at the amount of attention that cocaine in general is giving in society, but I think the most recent figures at the coalface, the people that are seeking treatment, 20% of the people seeking treatment for cocaine are seeking it for crack cocaine, because it is a highly addictive substance.
Likely because of those health effects that I described at the beginning of this. I mean, people can probably take other drugs for years without that physical effect showing on them, and leaning on the health services, because of course that's what does happen then. So now in 2019 there was a report out from Ballymun Youth Action Project, right? It was authored by Dr. Laura O'Reilly and Christor McCunna, and at that point it was describing it as a timely and welcome insight into the problems associated with crack cocaine in the area, and basically sort of describing it as something overdue to be looked upon. You'd have to wonder after it gives, I'll just read you a little bit of it here. The indications are that crack cocaine is widely available and easily accessible in a way that does not appear to be exclusive to Ballymun. Perhaps one of the most worrying findings relate to the extent to which young people are engaged in the drugs market, not just in terms of their own use, but also as runners and dealers. The report discusses a wide range of issues that are inevitably connected to crack cocaine use, including health, mental health, housing, stigma. And it gives an insight into the lived experience of fear and intimidation associated with the crime and violence, and with the work of communities and community services to strengthen community resilience to deal with these issues. You'd wonder, with a report like that, a significant report like that coming out, and obviously it's there for anyone to read, it's a public report of 62 pages, and it goes into all those areas we've talked about. Was that something that fell through literally the cracks when, you're looking at 2020 and what happened, and obviously with pandemic and lockdowns and, such an amount of government funding going into keeping businesses alive. The likes of this report, the timing of it in itself was somewhat unfortunate. And during that time, of course, that's exactly the kind of dealing that kept going.
Yeah, and, remember, even into 2021, Archbishop Dermot Farrell actually came out and publicly said that ordering crack cocaine was like ordering a drink for certain communities.
Yeah.
That it is that extent of a problem, but there's no doubt that it doesn't get looked at, possibly because of the
so
type
low level.
It's so low level. But crack cocaine, as you said there, there's the physical effects which are obvious, but the mental health effects of it are particularly grim because of the level of basically even what we were talking about earlier, because of how it works in the brain, because the hit is dissipates so quickly. What follows is this intense paranoia. And in the US, you've seen this kind of wild violence that's been associated with it in some users, So it's a huge problem, and it's not something that is going to get the attention it deserves, really.
The seizure this week, of course, was made by a number of probationary Gardaí. They've been on patrol in Ballymun when they came upon, and this is a typical story, two young males on e-bikes. Burner phones in their pockets, and then this quantity of, and it's that scooter generation, it's that e-bike generation. They're very young kids going around, taking this substance from stash houses, delivering it. Like what we've seen in around the inner city before, in relation to sometimes it's tablets, sometimes it's meth, and it is just young teenagers being used to deliver it, and that's a grooming process. It's an absolute entry drug dealing, really, for those young kids.
It is, and it's also if you want to look at it in these terms, it's a really steady market as well, because you've really hard people that are, absolutely addicted, need to do it every day. And it's a steady market, we're unlike sort of weekend users of cocaine who may or may not.
Yeah, well, recreational drug use will move with the economy.
Yeah, move with the economy.
It won't collapse, obviously, when the economy does, but it'll certainly, you could note that there wouldn't be as heavy sales at the weekend. And this is the 24/7 sort of thing that's keeping the drug system alive.
100%. And it's, it's when you have archbishops coming out and saying this is a big problem, it really is. And there's also again, any of these issues highlight the fact that if people are to seek help, is that help available to them? Obviously we talked about opiates and heroin, but when people come forward for help, they're given, amongst other things, methadone has been there to give as a substitute for people to help them get off heroin and stop buying on the streets. But of course, nothing there is no equivalent for crack cocaine. I mean, there's no, substitute for it. And that's a problem in the treatment of it. Because then if you can't give people something to get over that initial phase, how do you help them? Presumably residential treatment is the best. And we all know the reality is that those beds just aren't there in this country.
Okay, Niall, thank you.
Thanks, Nicola.
I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.